Right now, the water level in Lumantia is dropping, and for the newly added fish in this Giant Lagoon Vivarium, the world as they know it is shrinking. Here in the Philippines, where I live, the very heart of global marine biodiversity, coastal life is defined by one relentless force: the changing tides. In the wild, when the tide recedes across mangrove forests, lagoons, and brackish estuaries, it triggers nature's ultimate reset button. It bakes off excess algae, flushes out biofilm, and sends a wave of nutrients out to sea. Today, we're putting Lumantia's high-tech tidal system to the test to simulate a full low tide. But as the water recedes and swimming space disappears, how will our new fish handle it? Will wild instincts take over? Or will panic set in? I was about to find out, and didn't know it yet, but in the end, be completely mind-blown. Welcome to the Ecosystem Vivarium Series, here on the AntsCanada Ant Channel, Lagoon Edition. Please subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon. Welcome to the AC family. Enjoy. I approached Lumantia, and the sight took my breath away. It was such a magnificent world that was coming together nicely. A Halloween crab, a nocturnal creature, was up having its breakfast of decaying diatoms. I wondered if it knew this beach shore would be exposed to the air when low tide hits. Inside one of the caverns was another hermit crab, and it's done a great job at clearing out the space of diatoms. This entire cavern would also be exposed to the air come low tide. A zombie snail was racing towards some organic mass it could smell with its huge tube appendage, towards the other side of the lagoon. All the zombie snails were out, seeking decaying material to eat on this fine night in the lagoon. The starfish were busy feeding on dead diatoms along the floor. A turbo snail was grazing from diatoms on the glass. Others were grazing from the mangroves. These mangrove roots would also be exposed to the air during low tide. As for the fish, they were all heading to bed now in their new home. There's Michelangelo, a gorgeous blue-faced angelfish with his orange mask winding down for bed among the rocks. Vogue, the lipstick tang, at first tried to sleep somewhere along the beach shore, but later felt the need to wander somewhere else. After testing out the mangrove ambiance, nope, not quite what she was looking for. Time to wander into deeper waters. Pikachu, the rabbitfish, had found a neat spot in a sheltered corner, and Vogue liked this spot. There were other fish like Dory, the blennies, the blue-cheek gobies Gogo and Bibi, and Cavil, the blue-eyed tang, but they had retreated into the labyrinth of the extensive cave system behind the live rock wall. I know seeing marine species in Lumantia's brackish water rustled a few feathers in the hobby over the past couple episodes. In standard reef keeping, these are strictly full salinity animals. But in nature, coastal lagoons act as vital nursery grounds where young marine life naturally adapts to fluctuating lower salinities, and our fish and invertebrates came straight from one of these wild lagoon habitats, so I knew they felt at home. Now, I created Lumantia with the purpose to explore these complex lagoon environments firsthand and observe how real-world lagoon ecosystems function. And though all this might seem unconventional, from a pet hobby standpoint, I knew this recreation of nature was as accurate as we could get to a true lagoon. And if we wanted to truly understand the nature of lagoon ecosystems, I knew we had to let nature teach us, even if it may cause some controversy among my fellow hobbyists. I also knew things were about to get even more controversial because this mindset brings us to our next experiment. A move that might seem radical for an aquarium, but is completely natural for a lagoon, simulating a low tide cycle. And this was the grand plan from the very start. I had scheduled the next low tide mode for the following evening, just so the fish could settle in stress-free for a bit. But little did these fish know, their new lagoon kingdom was about to undergo a very drastic transformation, and I was ready to document it all for science. If anything went wrong today, hundreds of gallons of water and the lives of our brand new fish were on the line. That's why I couldn't do this alone. I brought in my team of elite marine experts, veterans who have lived and breathed coastal ecosystems their entire lives, to stand by in case of a total emergency. Today was the ultimate test for Lumantia. Over the next 2 hours, the automated systems would drain 300 gallons of water, slashing the lagoon's volume from 500 gallons down to a mere 200. The starfish, crabs, and snails had already proven they could handle this massive drop. But free-swimming fish? That was a completely different story. Looking at the tank, my gut was telling me there simply wouldn't be enough water left for them to survive a daily tide cycle. I must have asked the team 20 times if they were absolutely sure the fish would be okay. Every time, they assured me the math checked out and that the fish would be totally fine. But staring into that glass, I couldn't shake the fear. Then, click. Deep inside the machinery beneath the lagoon, low tide mode engaged, and 300 gallons of water began to ever so slowly disappear. Pikachu went into hiding in the seagrass as it could sense something was coming. As for the other fish, I was unsure if they were aware of what was happening. The starfish had been through all of this before, so they were totally chill. So were the turbo snails. The rest remained on the lagoon floor, and I wondered if this was on purpose and if they knew it was low tide time. The hermit crab within the cavern was about to find out its watery home was gonna get real airy very soon. Check out this starfish, who chose to spend low tide inside this tide pool, which is exactly what some starfish will do in nature. This lagoon was about to undergo a drastic change, and at this point, I believed all the fish could finally sense it now. I actually love how the fish seem to be the best of friends. Despite only having met the day before, they instinctively convened in a school to remain at ease. At 500 gallons, the fish still had plenty of space to roam and continued to graze on diatoms as usual. Gogo and Bibi were also out. Soon the top wavemaker turned off, and I think this alerted the fish that there was indeed something significant coming. Vogue could sense something was different and felt more secure hanging out by the mangroves. The other fish had sought refuge in the cave system behind the live rocks. "Hey," called Michelangelo. "Not sure what's happening, but I'm hanging out in here." Interesting that the first instinct the moment water began to drop was to seek shelter. This to me made sense, because fish swimming out in low tide exposes the fish to predators from above, namely birds. He peeked out periodically to check the scene. Vogue and Michelangelo were the biggest fish, so they would be most affected by this low tide. Vogue felt the need to check out the spacious open area, as Michelangelo continued to peek and come out periodically to check things out. I was still so nervous about this as the water level continued to drop. The cavern was now exposed to air. There's Pikachu, also in hiding. Michelangelo continued to wander, as well as Vogue. But surprisingly, according to the fish team, based on their color and swimming, the fish weren't showing signs of stress. In fact, the fish seemed to be out now, looking for food. This was an eye-opener, and the fish team helped shed some light on what was happening here. So it turns out, in nature, low tide often becomes a feeding frenzy for fish. Many fish will take full advantage of these low tide periods, as prey creatures get flushed out of hiding, and in the case of lagoons, is forced into a smaller space where the fish can have an easier time catching them. For this reason, apparently some fish will even seek out large tide pools to feed in during low tide, which is essentially what Lumantia here becomes during this low tide mode. The fish remained calm, with even Pikachu coming out of hiding as soon as he realized Lumantia was free of predatory birds overhead. The water level continued to drop. To my surprise, the fish seemed okay and continued as if life was fine and dandy. The waterline was approaching low tide level. The fish still okay. Vogue and Michelangelo were like best buds, feeding together. And even visiting Pikachu. The water level was just so low now, and my heart was beating in my chest. We watched the fish religiously for signs of stress, and were ready to have the water come rushing back in case of emergency. Hey, there's Dory. And then, after a whole 2 hours, Lumantia achieved low tide, and what happened next completely surprised me. Come out, guys! It's all right! The fish emerged, including Cavil. Checking their colors, the fish seemed at ease and appeared to be looking for food floating around the currents. This starfish had moved lower into the water. The fish had about a foot of water to swim in at the deepest area. The friends group stuck together. Cavil joined the team. As for the Blennies and the Gobies, they were nowhere to be seen, perhaps hiding in the rocks somewhere. Pikachu and Cavil ended up breaking away from the bigger fish to explore closer to the rocks for food. Again, colors totally intact. I marveled at a sight I didn't ever expect. Now, my camera lenses distort the proportions as they appear on screen, but in real life, I realized the space wasn't as restrictive as I thought it would be. The fish could swim openly as they fed and explored Lumantia. Again, colors signaled fish at ease. Pikachu turns ashy when stressed, for instance, and Vogue's yellow forehead turns grayish when stressed. The fish team was right, and I began to fall at ease. Now, these fish also have a canned food that I need to feed them daily to cover their nutrients. So I decided to use this time to complete the process and match what would happen in nature by feeding them this canned food during this low tide to simulate the influx of prey in the water. They came rushing in as soon as they could smell it hitting the water. I must say this was all truly an eye-opener. An hour later, Lumantia kicked back into high tide mode as the cold oceanic waters began to slowly return. The biofilm sludge began to seep out of the crevices, where it would end up in our sump and extracted from the waters from the protein skimmer. The low tide had also exposed a lot of the diatoms to air, effectively killing it and dislodging it for the fish and other creatures to eat. It was only a matter of time before all these diatoms were gone, and these waters were clear again. All the fish were swimming around, picking away at the dead diatoms and leftover canned food along the floor. Even the gobies were out, sifting the sand of food. And look, it's one of the blennies, emerging from the rocks. To check things out, hey Benny, where's Lenny? Overall, I was glad the fish seemed okay through the low tide simulation and appeared to feel comfortable throughout the process. Now, although the fish seemed to deal with low tide okay, I did make an executive decision. In the wild, these fish would typically have the option to swim into deeper lagoon waters if they wanted to, and here the fish had to spend an hour in a foot of water, again essentially like being confined to a tide pool. So I decided to make an adjustment to low tide mode. And instead of dropping it the full 200 gallons, I decided the water should drop somewhere midway to 300 gallons and only remain in low tide for 30 minutes instead of the full hour. I felt this gave the Lumantian system enough airtime to do its self-cleaning gig while still giving more room for the fish, which will be especially important as we continue to add in more creatures. I'm okay with 300 gallons being the low tide level. How about you guys, AC family? Now I should clarify again, however, that I don't recommend hobbyists attempt this at home, as I have a highly experienced team I'm working with and a complex technological setup to ensure the well-being of all the life in this lagoon vivarium, that again were also sourced from a local lagoon. If you're keeping marine fish, do yourself a favor and keep them in a marine tank, just to be safe. Also worth noting, Lumantia is by no means the final destination of these fish, but I won't reveal any more than that. Wink wink. There's still so much more planned ahead for the development of Lumantia's ecosystem, like the animals I plan to add for the jungle area, as well as the highly anticipated creatures that I'm sure you can guess for the mud flats. But I'll skip that and invite you to please subscribe to the channel, as this helps support the series more than you'll ever know and ensures you be a part of this ongoing biological journey of discovery with me as Lumantia's ecosystem becomes alive and eventually attaches to the main network of other ecosystem vivaria to start exchanging life. Now, I know some of the things we explore in this Ecosystem Vivarium project go right against standard, long-standing hobby wisdom, and honestly, I welcome that pushback. The rules of fish keeping and herpetology exist for a reason. They keep our animals safe in traditional setups, and every single keeper should hold each other accountable. Healthy debate is how we grow as a community. But what this project continuously reveals is that standard rules are written for standard tanks. When you scale up to a true micro-ecosystem, in this case guided and monitored alongside world-class marine aquarium specialists, the rules of engagement change. When you give nature enough space, depth, and structural complexity, Mother Nature routinely surprises us. For instance, conventional wisdom said adding a pufferfish to Hydromeda, my wetlands vivarium, was a total non-starter and would obliterate our cherry shrimp. But in a massive ecosystem with complex microhabitats and an endless self-renewing supply of snails, for the puffer, that shrimp colony isn't just surviving over a year later, it's thriving. The same goes for housing multiple ant species. In a confined space, it's chaos. But in a biodiverse macro space, micro niches allow them to coexist, just as they do in the wild. This isn't about throwing out the rulebook. It's about writing new chapters together. Like the changing of the tides, our understanding of the natural world is constantly evolving. Lumantia, our giant lagoon ecosystem vivarium, was built to help us acquire a different perspective on the world of saltwater environments and shed light on these complex, largely unexplored sanctuaries, known as the world's brackish lagoons. Now, about building up Lumantia's ecosystem. It was now time for the addition of more cleanup creatures to help deal with the remaining algae. Creatures that I admit actually make me somewhat, how do I say, hungry. AC family, meet our next group of lagoon creatures I've been lobbying for, that I know you guys will find totally clawsome.
Clock doesn't stop, gotta live your life.
Vote in my community tab to affect this story.